Hello, and thank you for joining me. You're listening to Bold and Faithful, and I'm Evangelist Esther Ross. Please subscribe to this channel, click on that notification bell, and share this truth with others. The first ship carrying enslaved Africans arrived at Old Point Comfort on August the 25th, 1619. An English privateer ship captured the Africans from a Spanish slave ship. The privateer traded the enslaved Africans to English colonists in Virginia for food. Though they arrived in bondage, their immediate future and legal status was uncertain. The Virginia colony's laws did not recognize enslavement. It was unclear what their official legal status was, but it did not change them being captives and enslaved against their will. Being sold for wares to the English colonies forced them into lives of servitude. The Africans brought skills in farming, herding, blacksmithing, and other trades. Their skills helped the Virginia colony survive and grow. The Africans also brought their own cultures, languages, and religious beliefs. They made the colony's food production and trades more efficient. They also enriched the colony's culture with music and dance. Remember, Africans had their own religious beliefs. That means Africans did not arrive in America as Christians who followed the traditions of Christianity. As slaves, they were later forced to believe in Christianity. They were taught from a book titled The Holy Bible for the Use of Slaves. And God was completely misrepresented by the slave owners and overseers who taught about God from that book. The first people on earth were Goyim, Gentiles. Moses, began learning about Genesis and part of Exodus when he was 80 years old, after all the people named in the chapters of Genesis had died. Words are like big fat worms on a hook, and they catch people through emotions when a cunning plot is planned. That's how religions got started. Words. Elohim God created Yitzhak, Isaac, by performing a miracle. Sarah had been barren. Yitzhak was the father of twins. Esau, the firstborn, represented Gentiles who came first. Rivka, just like Sarah, was also barren. No seed from Abraham created Yitzhak, and no seed from Yitzhak created Esau and Yaakov, Jacob, the man God named Israel. Therefore, biological seed that leads to Shem should include Ishmael and Lot. The same way genealogy from Shem leads to Yeshua, called Jesus in English, from the Greek word Isus. However, Shem is not in the covenant line. Read Romans 9, verses 6 through 9. Word replacement needs to end, and truth about the Word of God needs to be taught regularly. Africans had religious beliefs. Romans were polytheistic Gentiles who worshiped idol gods. Both Romans and the English took what God had given to the covenant tribes of Israel and passed it off as though God presented it to them. This is not so. The Talmudim, students of Yeshua, and Shaul, called Paul, and other emissaries, sent ones from the house of Israel, taught the Roman Gentiles. And they were repaid with suffering, but later they were called saints. Beware of words. Democrats use words in amazing ways, and just like belief in the religions Christianity and Catholicism, few people concern themselves about what's true. Truth that not one verse from Genesis to Revelation said to start a religion or to become a Christian or Catholic. The word Easter is found in Acts 12, verse 4, King James Version, but it says Passover in the New King James Version. Words can get people baited into responding through emotions of anger and fear, or a desire to fight against something or someone without knowing all the facts. That's because religions teach us how to hear, believe, follow the leader, and stick with the majority with no questions asked. Adam did well in his obedience and never felt ashamed until he disobeyed God for love. and then he saw his flesh. That's why everyone, but especially African Americans, need to remember history. The Republican Party didn't change. They still want a country that will prosper. After the collapse of the Whig Party over the issue of slavery, the Republican Party was formed in 1854 by Northern abolitionists, those who wanted to put an end to slavery. The party took a strong stance against slavery and its expansion into the new U.S. territories. The party quickly became the dominant opposition to the Democrat Party. In the 1860 election, Republican Congressman Abraham Lincoln won the presidency. During the Civil War, Lincoln declared that slavery was no longer legal in the Confederate States and later helped pass constitutional amendments ending slavery and declaring birthright citizenship. That's why we need the SAVE Act. On April the 9th, 1866, just a year after Lincoln's final speech and death, the United States Congress, over a rejection from the belligerent Democrat President Andrew Johnson, passed the very first Civil Rights Act in American history. It was passed because of Republicans. And that Democrat President, Andrew Johnson, rejected it. Soon after, the 14th Amendment followed. Soon after this, the 14th Amendment followed, enshrining that law's precepts permanently in the Constitution. That law's precepts were permanently put into the Constitution. Because most African Americans were unaware or failed to remember what Republicans had already done, when Democrats came up with the Civil Rights Act in 1964, immediately this action triggered the emotions of African Americans who fell for the bait and switched from Republicans to Democrats. Democrats seem to always win over people who want or need their beliefs represented. Now it's abortions. Long ago, it was birth control pills. It's also gender identity and illegal immigrants in sanctuary states. Remember God as you make choices, because God does not change. People do. But God has the final say. So much of what's going on is really defiance. Defiance against the word of God, the commands that God made, and defiance against the laws that are put in place in America. The SAVE Act says that only American citizens should be allowed to vote, and that this should be done by presenting a valid ID. There shouldn't be anything wrong with that, and no person should be against that unless they want something illegal done. Illegal immigrants should also always enter America through vetting and due process. I respect President Biden, but what was done to America was wrong. All those illegal immigrants being allowed into this country without vetting and due process was wrong. And it is especially wrong because now Democrats don't want any of them to be deported. That's wrong. We either have to stand for what's true or we will fall for what's wrong. We can't be double-minded. A double-minded person is unstable in all their ways. So I'm hoping that however anyone votes, vote with God in mind. God took the life of Onan. I believe it was in Genesis, the 38th chapter. He took the life of Onan for spilling his seed on the ground, because seed represents life. Let's always remember God as we make decisions, because some of this voting is against God. not against another party. Have a wonderful evening, and God bless you always. So long now, and I hope you keep listening.